settle in. Tonight we will drift at an easy pace along the ocean's endless thoroughfares, following the long monotonous migrations of baleen whales, where the water moves like a patient, wide river, and time stretches out as gently as a sleeping tide. The aim is to soothe you, to carry you as quietly as a current, and to keep your mind company while you settle into the soft edges of rest. If you enjoy these slow voyages and want more calm science to fall asleep to, a gentle nudge, please like and subscribe. And if you want to keep learning while your eyes grow heavy, there's a playlist link in the description waiting to play on quietly as you drift off. How sleepy are you on a scale of 1 to? Imagine yourself resting on a stable raft of thought, hardly moving, just floating at the surface. The light is low, as if the day has paused before night. Somewhere beneath, a whale moves through vast water that seems endless, yet the path is familiar, carved not by stone, but by gentle pressure and the repeated intent of generations. The ocean is full of invisible roads, made of currents and temperature contrasts and faint chemical cues, and the whales follow them with a patience that can lull even the most wakeful mind. You find yourself listening for the sound of a distant fluke breaking the surface, but what you hear instead is even quieter, the soft punctuation of small waves touching the sides of your imaginary raft. In this calm, it is easy to think of baleen whales as very large travelers making very slow decisions, each one measured in body lengths and heartbeats, each one linked to seasons that turn like a soft wheel. They leave their feeding grounds where cold waters are dense with plankton and krill, and they move, gradually and deliberately, toward warmer, clearer waters where calves can be born in gentler conditions. The gentle rhythm continues. The migrations are long. Humpback whales roll between polar feeding areas and tropical breeding grounds across wide ocean basins. Grey whales trace the continental edges of the Pacific from the Arctic to the warmer lagoons along the Baja Peninsula, moving like drawn string along a coastline. Blue whales, vast and quiet, wander between productive upwelling zones and calmer, less productive seas, carrying enormous energy stores in their blubber like slow-burning lanterns. Each route is a line, and yet in the water it is a broad path, shaped by currents that are never still. Imagine yourself hovering over a map, not of continents, but of moving water, with arrows that drift and bend, with gyres turning very slowly, and with temperature bands like soft ribbons across the surface. In these long travels, the whales' bodies are made for endurance rather than haste. They do not rush, because the ocean is generous and vast, and because rushing would not change the grand schedules that the sea keeps. Baleen plates hang like delicate curtains from the upper jaw in many species, a brush that sifts tiny prey from the water. The plates are composed of keratin, the same material that builds your fingernails and hair, and yet they serve as the flexible machinery that allows a whale to turn fields of minuscule creatures into steady nutrition. You continues as we consider the ocean highways themselves. Currents, spun by winds and the Earth's rotation, set broad loops in motion. The North Pacific Gyre, the South Pacific Gyre, the circular rhythms of the North Atlantic, the Southern Ocean's ceaseless belt that wraps around Antarctica. All of these are like slow conveyor belts of heat and salt and life. Imagine yourself as a drop of water entering a current and discovering that the path you must follow is already laid out, not in stone, but in motion. You drift southward with the California current, then turn westward on the North Equatorial current, and time becomes a long exhalation. The whales use these flows as travelers use gentle tailwinds, not fighting water they can join, shedding tension we might hold on land. The gentle rhythm continues. In the feeding grounds of high latitudes, short summers blaze softly with productivity. The days grow long, the sun skimming near the horizon but holding on, and the water stratifies just enough to let sunlight nurture blooms of phytoplankton. This microscopic floating flora grows in vast numbers, turning sunlight into new substance. Zooplankton follow, then schooling fish, then the whales. In the Antarctic, krill gather as if the sea itself is thinking about abundance, and the glaciers watch quietly from the edges. In the North Atlantic, lines of tide and shelf meet, and deep nutrients rise up. In the North Pacific, winds press the surface and bring a steady gift from below. Imagine yourself standing on the cold deck of an imaginary ship, breathing air that smells faintly of salt and iron and distant rain, and feeling the presence of whales as subtle ripples beneath the surface, moving in patterns older than maps. The monotony here is a comfort, not a boredom. The migration repeats every year, with small adjustments, with detours that the whales understand intuitively. A slightly different path to follow a particular prey bloom, a slightly earlier departure when the polar sun tilts more quickly toward night. They are not hurried by clocks, but guided by delicate cues: day length, water temperature, the density of plankton layers, the inner state of their bodies that holds the memory of previous journeys. You find yourself breathing with their pace in long, slow waves. Sound carries better in water than in air, and at low frequencies it can travel very far. Baleen whales often communicate in rumbles and moans, and drawn-out notes that feel more like weather than speech. Humpback whales sing, weaving complex songs that can last for long minutes, even hours, gently rearranged from season to season. Blue whales produce low, almost infrasounds that roll quietly across the ocean, a kind of slow heartbeat of the sea. In these migrations, the whales listen to one another and to the environment, and then they move. Imagine those sounds like long strokes in a painting of air made of water. The gentle rhythm continues. Their bodies carry oxygen like traveling candles that burn quietly. Diving, they slow their heartbeats. They direct blood to the organs that need it most. They rest their muscles in sequences that look like grace. Myoglobin in their muscles holds oxygen close, and hemoglobin in their blood carries it patiently where it is needed. When they rise to breathe, the breath is not a dramatic imagination. It is a controlled vent of air, warmer than the surroundings, a soft, brief cloud, then back again into the soft pressure of the water, back into the low-light world. You find yourself picturing the migration in the shape of a year. In the high latitudes, summer feeds them, and they eat many small meals that add up to a vast intake. They store the energy as blubber. Then slowly, as days begin to shorten and the water starts to cool, they turn their heads toward lower latitudes. The journey begins. They often fast much of the way, relying on those stored reserves. In tropical waters, calves can be born in a gentle temperature that does not drain them as quickly, and mothers can nurse without the constant cold pulling heat away. After a time, when the season slides forward and the signal in the whales' bodies is clear, they turn again, repeating the path. The gentle rhythm continues as a year becomes a loop, a measured circle. There are different whale species, each with its own migration story, and each story is soothing in its predictability. Humpback whales leave the rich feeding grounds of Alaska and the North Pacific to join warm Hawaiian waters, or in the Eastern Pacific, they move toward the gentle sheltered bays along Mexico and Central America. In the North Atlantic, humpbacks pass Iceland, Greenland and Norway, and then drift toward the Caribbean. In the Southern Hemisphere, pairs of routes pass from Antarctic feeding zones to the tropical coasts of South America, Africa and Australia. Grey whales, with their mottled skin and habit of coastal travel, move along the edges of land like a careful hand tracing a shoreline. Blue whales may be more diffuse, following upwelling zones off California, Chile, and elsewhere, attentive more to food than to shorelines, but the same seasonal pattern holds. Feed in cold, gather in warm, repeat. The gentle rhythm continues. Imagine yourself moving along the seafloor's gentle features without seeing them directly, only sensing their presence in the shape of the water. The continental shelf falls away, and whales sometimes track these lines, especially species that prefer coastal routes. The slope becomes a broad ramp that guides a path. Canyons cut into the shelf like slow-motion rivers, focusing currents that might carry sound and scent, faint cues that still reach sensitive bodies. Mountains rise in mid-ocean, seamounts like sleeping volcanoes. Currents wrap around them and create eddies on the far side, a soft wind shadow in water that can gather plankton and fish. These features are the mile markers of a highway with no lanes, watched by animals who do not need signs. The gentle rhythm continues. Big Hence the way the ocean's vertical landscape also matters. The surface layer, warmed by the sun, covers deeper, colder water where nutrients hide. Sometimes winds and currents draw this cold water upward, opening a window of productivity that whales learn to find. The thermocline, that thin region where water temperature shifts quickly with depth, is a quiet wall the whales cross and recross. In the deep twilight, the dim smoky blue light is calm and endless, and the whales move through it as if walking through a slow rain. As they pass, their presence is felt by the small creatures that share their path. Krill shoals shift gently, fish adjust, and the murmuring of the sea continues. Baleen means sifting, and feeding varies by species, but always with that soft filter at the core. Some whales skim steadily with mouths slightly open, letting the water deliver tiny food to their baleen and then pushing it out with the tongue. Others lunge feed, opening the mouth in a measured, deliberate arc to take in a volume of water and prey, then closing and straining the water out while the food remains, collected by the baleen's frayed edges. Even lunges, when they come, are embedded in long stretches of easy travel. The aim is not a dramatic hunt, but a slow gathering. The gentle rhythm continues. As you drift further into this quiet, imagine the whales navigating. There are cues everywhere, the angle of sunlight filtering through cloud bands, the temperature lines that divide one body of water from another, the familiar feel of swell patterns wrapping around island chains, the faint geomagnetic hints that make a world map inside a mind. The whale's roots are faithful and traditional, a cultural memory passed through populations and pods, not with words, but with repeated movement. Calves travel with mothers, learning the line of the migration like a lullaby repeated until it is part of them. You can almost hear it in the water, a long tone that says, here, then farther on. You find yourself with the whales at the midpoint of their journey, where the path is long behind and long ahead. This is where patience is most powerful, where the mind learns to soften and let the water carry the thought. At this midpoint, you can feel your body letting go a little more, knowing that there is no rush. The gentle rhythm continues. Along these highways, other travelers move. Sea turtles trace routes between nesting beaches and feeding grounds, guided by magnetic whispers and soft currents. Seabirds like albatrosses wheel on miles of wind, landing only briefly, skimming the line where air and water meet. But tonight our attention is for the baleen whales, steady as a clock that never ticks loudly. The human world is far away here. The ocean is a long, low sound, deep and reassuring. The whales are not alone. The ocean's greatest migration happens every day in vertical motion. Each evening, in the dimming light, many millions of small creatures rise from deeper water toward the surface. Copepods, krill, small fish, and other animals drift upward to feed safely in the night, and each morning they sink again into the darker layers. It is a gentle, daily inhale and exhale of life in the sea, a tide of bodies rather than water. Whales sleep, though their sleep is not quite like ours. They may rest near the surface, logging quietly, with breaths spaced out. They may doze while slowly swimming, taking turns resting parts of the brain, or entering shorter, lighter phases of sleep. It is an elegant compromise between vigilance and rest, allowing them to breathe and to remain aware of their surroundings, even as their bodies and minds restore themselves. The image of a whale sleeping is serene, a long shape, barely moving, lifted by gentle swells, exhaling now and then slipping back into the soft rhythm of the water. The gentle rhythm continues. The ocean is not uniform, and the whales know this intimately. In some places, cold tongues of water slide along warm surfaces, a contrast that can be felt by skin that senses temperature gradients with subtlety. In other places, eddies form, spinning off main currents and creating a circular dance of water that can last weeks or months. An eddy can be like a small world, its own microclimate of nutrients and light, a place where food may gather more densely. The whales can encounter these features and adjust without drama, the same way you might turn slightly on your pillow to find a more comfortable alignment. The journey continues, not in a straight line, but in a smooth conversation with the sea. Listening under the surface reveals a quiet tapestry. There are sounds of rain on the water, transmitted downward as a hiss. There are the far low groans of ice shifting in polar seas, the distant slow sigh of an undersea landslide that has already resolved into silence by the time the whales pass above. Even the crackle of small creatures can be heard in some places, shrimp snapping in warm shallows, like faint static, far from the deep roots that whales prefer for migration, but connected to the same ocean. The whale's own sounds layer into this, their signatures soft and extended, sometimes simple, sometimes complex, always shaped by the need to travel far in a fluid world. You find yourself hearing these layers, and then you feel yourself letting them slip into the background, like a fan that hums you to sleep. The gentle rhythm continues in the steady cycle of years. Some whales carry scars that are not painful in this imagining, simply marks of a long life, reminders of ice edges and sea floors, reminders of companionships made and dissolved across decades. Some species live very long lives. Bowhead whales in the Arctic can live for centuries, moving through the cold like slow, living histories with baleen fringes that have sifted the same kinds of prey through multiple human lifetimes. Their migrations are shorter than those of other baleen whales, but the principle is the same, a seasonal loop tied to ice and daylight and food, repeated so many times that it becomes a quiet tradition. The gentle rhythm continues. We can imagine the year unfolding with the whale's needs in mind. As spring leans into summer, they feed more intensely, taking advantage of the peak in productivity. Days are long, and the surface layers of the ocean become comfortable, full of light. The whales do not need to be always at the surface. They move vertically and horizontally as needed, as the prey layers drift and compress. When summer matures and begins to slide, the whales begin their move, not because a date has arrived on a calendar, texture, and inside the whales, endocrine messages quietly prepare them for a long swim. Imagine yourself noticing the same gentle thresholds in your own life, the soft and steady changes that do not demand immediate action but invite mindful adjustment. The calves' first migrations are slow. Born in mild waters, they learn to breathe, to nurse, and to swim with their mothers. Nursing whales do so on milk rich in fat, a concentrated source of energy that helps the calf grow and keeps it warm in the water. Calves rest often, and mothers pace themselves so that the young can keep up, using sheltered routes when possible, staying near coasts in some species where waves are calmer and water is warmer. The two bodies move like carefully synchronized dancers, with the mother's flukes setting a rhythm that the calf mirrors. This companionship is one of the quiet anchors of the migration, a pair moving through space as if sharing one long, smooth thought. You find yourself imagining the broad seascapes they pass through. In the North Pacific, grey whales hug the coast, threading along the rocky edges of the continent where kelp forests move like slow green curtains. In the Central Pacific, humpbacks cross deep blue expanses between Alaska and Hawaii, a long reach over deep water, paved only with waves. In the Southern Ocean, the cold is alive with krill and icebergs drift like sleeping islands, while the whales gather enough energy to withstand their long rides to lower latitudes. Each part of the world has its own flavor of water, its own color and scent. The smell near coasts is rich and earthy. Offshore, the air is cleaner, saline and sun-warmed. Near ice, it feels bright and crisp, almost silent. The gentle rhythm continues. At times, the whales encounter frontal zones where two water masses meet, and these often become lines of life. Prey concentrates, and birds gather above, peering down with sharp eyes, while the whales slip beneath, unseen. The whales do not linger overly long when they are on migration, yet they make use of what they find as they pass. They up a calm, continuing onward, the road always stretching ahead and behind. For a moment in your imagination, you hover above a frontal line and see the whales as slow shadows, gliding through a gentle boundary where greenish water meets sapphire. In the long distances, navigation is also a matter of memory. Whales return to the same breeding grounds year after year. Some return with remarkable fidelity to the same bays, sometimes even to the same corners of those bays. Over time, the population's knowledge forms invisible paths, not in the water, but in the mind, and calves inherit these mental maps as they follow their elders across the sea. It is a quiet, cultural heartbeat. The gentle rhythm continues. At night, stars mirror in the water, low points of light in gentle ripples. The whales below may not see them directly when they are deep beneath, but the night sky frames the migrations for those who witness them from afar. The Milky Way becomes a thread, a gentle smudge that echoes the long lines of migratory routes. Moonlight silvers the surface. For you, on your imaginary raft, the night is mild and supportive. The wind is barely there, like soft breath against your cheek. The long motion of the as a whale swim, down, glide, rise, pause, breathe, and down again. Some whales move in loose groups during migration, keeping casual company, separated by hundreds of meters or more, but staying within acoustic reach. Others travel more individually, coming together in breeding regions where courtship and social behaviors become more prominent. Even then, the pace is calm. There is time. Songs weave through the water, slowly changing as new patterns are introduced and others fade, like a long conversation that no one rushes to finish. The whales' lives are measured not just in seasons, but in rhythms within seasons, a layered music that runs beneath the practical needs of feeding, traveling, and raising young. The gentle rhythm continues. We might consider the whales' mouths again, not as engines of consumption, but as instruments of gentle precision. In right whales, the baleen can be very long, allowing them to skim calmly along the surface or just below, filtering tiny plankton from their path. In humpbacks, the pleats in the throat and belly, the ventral grooves, allow the mouth to expand like a suit of soft armor, taking in a gulp of prey-rich water, then contracting as the water is pushed out through the baleen. Blue whales, the largest animals to have ever lived, feed primarily on krill, and their lunge feeding is an elegant choreography of acceleration and slowing, of opening and closing, always followed by moments of coasting and recovery that restore the gentle baseline. Grey whales sweep the seafloor with their mouths, turning on their sides to filter amphipods from muddy sediment in shallower northern feeding grounds. Each method suggests a different relationship with the water, but all share the same unhurried essence when we look at them from far enough away, across the months and miles of the migration. You find yourself following the line of an isotherm, an imaginary contour on a map that connects places with the same temperature. These lines twist and turn with the seasons, and the whales cross them like travelers passing state lines on a long highway. To the whales, the differences are felt, not labeled. Warmer water feels softer on the skin, colder water bracing and full of life. The gentle rhythm continues. The physiology of these animals supports their long, quiet travels. Large lungs exchange air efficiently at the surface, with exhalations and inhalations paired in brief controlled bursts. Oxygen saturation rises quickly, and then the whale descends, making good use of the air in its blood and muscles. The heart might slow, the peripheral vessels adjust, the dive becomes a calm ballet of pressure and buoyancy. Whale bones are dense enough to withstand the pressure, yet the entire body is flexible, including the rib cage that can yield slightly as the depth increases. Blubber insulates and stores energy, a living memory of past meals that can be drawn upon during long fasting periods. Inside, enzymes work steadily, not rushed, and the whale's metabolism is set to a tempo that fits the scale of their lives. Imagine your own body syncing with that tempo, with a pulse that slows into comfort. The ocean highways cross latitudes and longitudes that see different weather, but the whales ride underneath most surface disturbances with little concern. Storms Because the whales are so large, they have a buffer. Their stored energy carries them through the quiet years. Such moderation is its own kind of wisdom. In our imagining, we focus on the assurance that these cycles, in their natural swing, always find a way to continue. The gentle rhythm continues. In tropical calving grounds, the water is often clearer and quieter. There are shallow banks with sand that glows pale under the sun and deeper blue beyond. The whales may come to sheltered bays where currents are soft and predators are less active. Mothers watch their calves carefully, helping them to the surface to breathe during the earliest days, guiding them with a gentle nudge. Nursing is frequent, and the calf grows visibly, gaining strength for the long return journey. During these weeks, the migration slows to a pause and becomes more about rest and growth. Songs may be heard in the distance, steady and unhurried, echoing through water that feels warm against the skin. You find yourself warmed by the same gentleness, as if tucked under a blanket of sea. Around the midpoint of our own gentle journey tonight, another soft invitation drifts by, like a note in a bottle. Still awake, comment the secret word, nebula. The quiet continues like tide. Far below the whales, the deep ocean holds mysteries that do not startle but soothe when considered from a distance. The abyssal plains are vast and calm, like a dream of steady sand. Hydrothermal chimneys whisper minerals into water where ancient microbes make a life without sunlight, a reminder of the sea's quiet resourcefulness. Seamounts rise from the dark like slow submerged hills, guiding currents and focusing life. The whales do not need to visit these depths to be connected to them. The ocean's layers are all part of a single continuous body, and motion in one place is felt elsewhere as a subtle resonance. The gentle rhythm continues. Think about the speed of a migration. It is not a sprint, not a quick crossing. A humpback might average only a few kilometers per hour while traveling, with many variations depending on conditions and whether calves are present. Over weeks and months, this steady pace becomes a vast arc of movement, like watching a minute hand cross a clock face, even though you cannot see it move at any moment. Days blend into each other for the whales, as they do for us when we let our routines become comforting, when we embrace the predictability of a peaceful schedule. In that sameness, there is room for rest and quiet imagination. The whale's skin is a map of experience. Barnacles hitch rides on some species, settling in places where the flow suits them. On humpbacks, those little rounded knobs on the leading edge of their flippers are tubercles, aiding in fine control of movement, allowing surprisingly agile turns. Yet even agility serves the larger rhythm of endurance, a series of small adjustments that make long travel more efficient. The dorsal fin of each whale, the pattern of spots or the unique tail fluke markings, tells apart one individual from another to human observers. To the whale's identity is likely carried more by sound and presence, by the way they move and the positions they hold. gentle rhythm continues. In ecologically rich regions, whales may linger. Off California, upwelling zones feed anchovies and krill, and the whales may feed more, then move on. Off Iceland, off South Georgia, off the Antarctic Peninsula, similar patterns emerge, with whales arriving when the table is set. You find yourself imagining a menu for whales that never includes drama, only abundance, measured in numbers too small to see individually, but staggeringly large in total. The ocean, patient and expansive, arranges and rearranges these offerings with the subtlety of wind. When you think of the whale's breaths, you might imagine fountains, but in this quiet journey, we feel them as carefully controlled releases of warm air that condense briefly in cool surroundings, then vanish. A steady presence. The blowholes open and close with firm precision, and water that collects on top is pushed aside. Muscles you cannot see coordinate the act, and the whale resumes its path. The rhythm of breathing at the surface during migration is regular, and the spaces between breaths are longer than ours, each one a small pause in a long sentence that the whale is speaking with movement. Over the long term, the migrations connect habitats that would otherwise stand apart. The high-latitude feeding regions, flush with nutrients during warm months, are linked to the low-latitude breeding regions, mild and protective. Energy harvested in one place is spent in another. This linkage helps distribute marine life and even nutrients across ocean basins in subtle ways. Whales themselves, through their movements and waste, contribute to the cycling of nutrients, bringing small amounts of iron and nitrogen from depth to surface, fertilizing phytoplankton that become food for the next year's prey. It is a quiet contribution, measured over many individuals and many years, a long, soft gesture of giving back to the water that sustains them. The gentle rhythm continues. On their journeys, whales may pass under islands, crossing channels where currents squeeze and accelerate. They may pass by seamount chains, where eddies form in train-like sequences. Once in a while, a whale's path threads through a narrow gate, where land constricts the sea, and then opens again to the broadness beyond. You imagine the sensation as a change in the texture of the water on their skin, perhaps a subtle acceleration, and then relaxing into a wider flow. These variations do not disrupt the calm. They ornament it like small ripples on the long swell of the migration. Baleen whales' senses are tuned to their environment. Hearing is especially important, but their whole bodies feel pressure changes and currents. Vision matters near the surface and in clearer water, less so in the deep and at night, but because they travel across many conditions, their visual world must be a gradient of experiences, from bright, sparkling caustics and soft shadows in shallow sunlit water, to deep indigo hues where daylight barely reaches. The whales are comfortable in all of it, not needing a constant brightness or a constant darkness, but resting within the day's cycle. The gentle rhythm continues. Imagine the weight of water pressing in at depth, not as a burden, but as a comforting blanket. The whale's bones hold, their lungs compress, their blood's oxygen is used with ocean remains smooth, thinking is calm, and awareness is wide. Then the slow glide back upward, and a breath at the surface. This pattern fits into the larger pattern of the migration. Each dive one stride, each breath one step. The whole journey a long walk along a trail too big to see all at once. Mothers and calves form a duet. The mother checks the calf with a touch of the flipper or a sweep of the tail that does not contact the calf but signals presence. The calf follows in the slipstream, a place of easier swimming, learning how to place its body to make the water do more of the work. Rest breaks come when needed, near quiet surface patches where waves are small, and the pair will float side by side, breathing together, letting time thicken and soften. The spell is unbroken. The gentle rhythm continues. As the whales approach breeding grounds, their behavior begins to shift. Males may sing more, and patterns of association change. Yet even then, the overall tone remains measured. Courtship is a steady process of displaying strength and presence, but it is not loud in this calm narrative. It is an exchange of signals in a quiet theatre of clear, warm water. The whales' bodies, energetic and honest, move in frames within frames. You view it from afar, like looking at a slow, underwater ballet. Our journey through these ideas touches on the whales, but also on the ocean as a whole. We are also riding inside the world's giant conveyor belt, a global circulation pattern that drives deep water from polar regions down and across basins, then upward again elsewhere, a cycle that takes centuries. The whales don't ride this deep flow directly, but their lives rest on the predictable structure that the conveyor provides, setting the stage for nutrient cycles and climate patterns. It is a constant that moves so slowly, it feels still, like the quiet spin of the earth beneath you when you lie still and feel nothing in particular, but know that time is passing. The gentle rhythm continues. Scientists learn about these migrations with methods as careful and quiet as the journeys themselves. Photo identification catalogues individuals by tail patterns. Acoustic arrays listen for songs. Satellite tags, when used carefully and respectfully, send small pings that translate into lines on a map, letting us see the highway shapes more clearly. Each data point is a soft footprint. Over years, the paths traced become chorus lines, and from them we infer so much. Timing of departures, preferred corridors, resting points, and the variability that indicates flexibility in a changing ocean. This knowledge adds to the comfort of our imagination, because it shows us that the patterns are real, and that the animals move with intention and calm consistency. In shallow lagoons and bays, water lessons become palpable. Seagrasses sway lazily. Fish move through channels in schools like slow-moving clouds, and the whales are large presences that pass through without a ripple in the sense of peace. There is room for everything, and everything is in slow motion. Sunlight plays on the backs of whales just beneath the surface, a soft dappled pattern that shifts Imagine running your hand through warm water and feeling tiny eddies curl around your fingers, a miniature echo of the currents that guide entire migrations. The gentle rhythm continues. The concept of home is intriguing for whales. Feeding grounds are more northern or southern, breeding grounds more equatorial, and many individuals seem attached to one set of locations for each purpose, as if by choosing one pair of anchors out of many possibilities. Home becomes a seasonal address, a place they leave and then regain again and again. The ocean between is not empty. It is a corridor they know as well as any home. There are no fences, no roads to repair, only paths maintained by movement itself. The whale's familiarity with these places is a quiet kind of knowledge, stored not in books, but in bodies. If the winter nights near the poles are long and dark, they are also gentle in their steady tone. Stars hang low, and the auroras sometimes drift like curtains of light, folding slowly and then smoothing out. The ocean cracks with ice near shore in some places, but beyond those, the open water offers a smooth runway for whale travel. During the summer, the long days bring the opposite mood, a bright, persistent glow, a sense of time that barely measures. The whales adjust without concern. For them, constant day is a tool for feeding. Constant night is a reason for quiet travel. The gentle rhythm continues. You find yourself wondering, without needing a sharp answer, how whales navigate over distances beyond sensory reach, and you let the possibilities be soothing rather than puzzling. They likely use a mixture of cues: the position of the sun when it is visible, the polarization of light in the sky, the faint magnetic lines that run down the world, the sound of distant coasts as waves break, the memory of currents that always bend in predictable ways around large features. No single cue needs to be perfect. It is the combination, blended and weighted by experience, that forms a slow, reliable map inside them. During their migrations, whales pass through layers of culture too. Each population's song is slightly different. Each group's path has its slight deviations. The songs of humpbacks can change over time, with new elements introduced from one population to another, diffusing across oceans at the speed of migration. This is a soft example of culture carried by movement, a demonstration that traditions are made not only of fixed rituals, but also of exchanges, of borrowed notes that fit and stay. In this way, migration is not just travel, it is conversation. Imagine the ocean at dawn and dusk, the times when transitions are most gentle. In the pale early light, the surface is a quiet mirror, and the breeze is still. DL vertical migration is underway as small creatures sink back toward deeper water, and the whales move through this cross-traffic calmly. At dusk, as the last light drains slowly, and the sky becomes a deep gradient of blue, the small creatures rise again, and the whales continue onward. Transition times are often peaceful in their soft edges, and whales live within several layers of such edges: seasonal, daily, tidal, and even the slow waves of multi-year cycles in the ocean that shift temperature and productivity over longer time scales. The gentle rhythm This shelf is wide in some places, narrow in others, and in the grooves carved by ancient rivers, there are channels where currents set into motion. Mapping these shapes reveals potential routes, and often the whales align with them, maintaining distance from chaotic surf while still benefiting from the productivity that margins provide. The shelf break, that rim where the shallow falls into the deep, can be a corridor as predictable as an old road through a familiar valley. The monotony of a migration is not dull when you surrender to it. It is a comfort. The whale's faith in their own pace gives the whole ocean a sense of order. There is time to stop and feed. There is time to rest. There is time to move and to let the miles slip by. In our lives, similar confidence in a calm routine brings relief. Each night, you set down the day's tasks and take up a slower rhythm. Each morning, you breathe, stretch, and begin again. The whales do this too on a grand scale, feeding in bright seasons, breeding in warm waters, and always travelling with the quiet certainty that the route will still be there. The gentle rhythm continues. The surface of the water tells you more than you might expect. Long lines of foam mark places where currents converge. The colour of the water changes with plankton concentration and depth. The pattern of waves shifts with wind speed and direction. To a whale, these are not details to note in a journal. They are the actual texture of the world. A gentle north wind for days on end can press water aside, lifting deeper water toward the light. A seamount might stand alone in the middle of nowhere, gathering an unexpected cluster of life. Yet the migration, like a river, flows around these features without noise. At times, whales may stop in places that are not quite feeding grounds and not quite breeding grounds, but rest stops of a sort, places where conditions are quietly pleasant, even if not rich with food. These places are like benches along a long walk. The whales linger and move on. No hurry, no restlessness. You picture them gently strung along a line of latitude or altitude, an airy necklace of dark shapes in vast blue. The gentle rhythm continues. The constraints of their bodies are also their freedoms. Large hearts pump slow and strong. Tails move up and down with power, but at a tempo that is easy to match when you listen for it. Muscles are efficient. The whales do not waste motion. In cold water, the heat they generate remains with them. In warm water, losses are minimal. This engineering, both a gift of evolution and a quiet complement to their behaviour, makes the migration not a challenge to be conquered, but a cycle to be lived through and through. If the whales pass by islands, the voices of seabirds become part of the seascape. Murmurs of colonies drift out over the water. Fish schools flash near the surface, their movement a slow pulse as they rise and sink in unison. Dolphins might join briefly, nearby, but on their own trajectories, a parallel dance in the same ballroom. The whales remain on their course, largely unbothered, in the way that long-distance travellers often appreciate company, but do not alter their own destinations for it. The gentle rhythm continues. The softest simplest understanding of migration is that it is simply the line by which energy flows through landscapes. The whales are conduits, moving stored energy from areas of plenty to areas of need. In this sense, the sprawl of their path has its own serenity. They are part of the ocean's memory. Each time a whale moves along the same route, that route deepens in the symphony of behavior, whether or not any physical trace is left in the water. For us, imagining it deepens our own memory of calm. The whispers of ancient migrations, older even than whales themselves, exist in the ocean's patterns. When continents were arranged differently, the currents took different shapes. As ice ages came and went, the feeding grounds expanded and contracted, and the whales' paths shifted accordingly. Yet the idea of movement between abundance and safety remains the same, a structure that is bigger than any single species or era. In this deep timeline, monotony is not a flaw. It is a kind of reassurance that things follow certain large arcs. The gentle rhythm continues. We might imagine a whale passing over a trench, the deepest part of an ocean basin, and consider that the water beneath is miles deep. The whale's world is boundless horizontally, but also layered vertically in a way that invites quiet awe. The trench itself is dark and still, a repository of time. The whale passing above is in the bright world of the sunlit zone, or the dim blue of the twilight zone. The separation is vast, yet both are part of a single system. The whale's migration links the scales. The surface routines connect with the planet's deepest places in a single unified body of water. For you, the listener, allowing yourself to be carried by this idea is like floating. There is no need to steer. Your breath is the current. The path is determined by the physics of relaxation, which leads you downward into sleep as surely as a whale follows the comfort of warm seas toward a calving ground. If your mind slips away from whales for a moment, that is fair. There is room to drift. The gentle rhythm continues. On the return journeys, the whales often regain feeding areas at the right time, as if setting their tables once again. Calves arrive larger and stronger, able to keep pace more easily. The first feeding after extended fasting can feel like a homecoming, though the whales do not celebrate in the ways we might. They simply feed, allowing the body to refill and restore, resetting a cycle that will again take them away and back. The reliability of this loop becomes a lullaby repeated every year. Out, rest, return, feed. Out, rest, return, feed. If we consider the chemical trails of the ocean, we can unfold another layer. Some areas carry the scent of dimethyl sulfide, a product associated with phytoplankton processes, which seabirds track and use to find food. Whales likely attend to a range of chemical signals as well, though much remains unknown. The journey is thus guided by a blend of senses. The nose may not be the primary guide in water, as it is in air, but certain cues can still inform whales when conditions are right, suggesting that a particular area holds promise. The gentle rhythm continues. As summer retreats in the poles, ice begins to form again, silently extending into waters that were open. The whales adjust softest bells over dark water. Whales hear them and turn slightly, perhaps orienting toward a gathering, or simply acknowledging presence. This is a world where the absence of urgency is the main comfort. There is no chase, only pace. You are welcome to let the story of these sounds play in your head very softly, like a radio left on in another room. Think of the whale's tails as slow pendulums. Each stroke is deliberate. Each phase of the stroke is part of a cycle that repeats without impatience. Muscles contract and relax in measured order. Bones and tendons flex and return. The hydrodynamics are clean and efficient, pushing against the water in a way that maximizes forward movement without turbulence. The whale does not fight the sea, it collaborates with it. This is the essence of migration as the whales know it. Cooperation with an environment that is always moving and never hostile in the way we might sometimes imagine. The gentle rhythm continues. Some whales may pause near islands and banks that lie along their routes, perhaps making short forays to feed if conditions allow, perhaps waiting for a social cue to move on. These pauses add texture to the migration, like rest notes in a long piece of music. The overall tempo remains the same. For weeks, the whales travel. For a few days, they pause. For weeks again, they travel. The slow alternation is soothing. As your awareness floats with the whales, you can step into the position of a whale calf, seeing the world through large, curious eyes. The water is full of small, light particles, dust motes that are not dust, but life. The mother is always there, a nearby wall of safety. Breathing feels new, and swimming is both work and joy. The calf learns to draft in the mother's wake to save energy. It learns to sound, to dive just a little deeper with each attempt, and then returns to the surface to breathe in the warm air that glows under the sun. Over time, the calf's muscles strengthen, and the migration becomes less mysterious. It is simply what whales do. In the southern hemisphere, the whale's year is the mirror image of those in the north. Seasons flip, and the migrations move in the opposite sense, but the logic is the same. Antarctic feeding areas in the summer fuel migrations to lower latitudes for the winter. The subtropical convergence and other fronts mark boundaries where whales might pass, lines drawn by temperature and salinity in bands wrapping around the globe. The gentle rhythm continues. We can look at the architecture of baleen more closely, always gently. The plates hang side by side, narrowing toward the ends and edged with fine hair-like fringe. When water passes through, the fringe mats slightly, creating a mesh that captures tiny prey. The whale's tongue and lower jaw work together to press water out while keeping food in. It is not a hurried process. It is methodical and precise. The mouth closes. The tongue sweeps. The mouth opens again at the next moment when prey density and position are right. This, too, fits into the migration, for feeding at scale requires time, and the whales schedule that time in the right seasons. The calm extends even to the way whales experience gravity. supportive medium. The gentle rhythm continues. Imagine the color of the ocean at different times: steel grey under cloud, emerald near productive coasts, ultramarine in the open tropics. The way light penetrates changes with purity and plankton concentration. The whales are comfortable in every palette. They move not for colour, but for resources, yet their world is always beautiful in a way that does not need to be named. You see it now and then as a soft glow through closed eyelids in your mind's eye. A discussion of migration often leads us to think about distance, and indeed it is vast. Some populations of grey whales travel around 10,000 kilometres each year. Humpbacks may travel similar lengths. Blue whales' migrations vary, but can be comparably extensive when conditions are favourable. Over a lifetime, the total distance travelled may be extraordinary, adding up to many times the circumference of the Earth. However, in each minute experienced by a whale, there is only the next stroke, the next breath, the next subtle cue. This helps us bring the scale back to something that can lull us. The big journey is built from tiny repeated acts that are individually simple, like the slow in and out of your breath. The gentle rhythm continues as we consider the whale's acoustic presence in the water. Noise travels well in water, but whales' calls are shaped to cut through ambient sound. Low frequencies bend around obstacles and stretch farther. Humpback songs convey structure in phrases and units that researchers have catalogued. Yet in the water, you perceive them as long, flowing tapes, patterns that spiral and morph slowly. The song's change from season to season is itself a migration, a movement of form that parallels the movement of bodies. You find yourself appreciative of the slow morphing of any good lullaby. Learn it once, and then altered slightly to keep it fresh, without losing its gentle comfort. As the whales reach their destinations, they settle into new routines. The breeding season, or calving in warm waters. Groups form and disperse. Courtship displays and competitions unfold, but even these can be framed in our minds as composed and slow. Then, when the time is right, the whales begin to turn back toward the latitudes where the sea is full of plankton, where the days stretch long, and where eating becomes a methodical, nourishing habit once more. The cycle closes and opens again. In your mind, you are now following a single whale along the quiet highway. You do not hurry it. You keep pace. The sky changes overhead. The water shifts colour. The currents gently alter the angle of your course. At night you float near the surface and look up at a round moon. By day you watch beams of light sifting down. The whale is not concerned with whether it is halfway or nearly there. It simply is moving. This simplicity is restful. The slow seesaw of migration is a stabilizing force for whale populations. It ensures that energy is gathered efficiently in the places where it is most available, and that reproduction occurs where survival odds for calves are highest. It spreads the whales across space and time, so that no single area holds all of them at once. It creates a long chain of presence that crosses oceans, a presence you can tune into whenever you need to feel that the world carries carries on at its own pace, indifferent to hurry. The gentle rhythm continues. To nod off in the idea of ocean highways is to accept that the best journeys do not announce themselves loudly. They whisper through the years. This whispering is the sound of the ocean's skin being stroked by wind, of birds speaking quietly over water, of whales' low notes deepened by distance. You can lower your guard and let that whisper do its work. If you find your mind cycling back through details, the baleen's fringe, the calf in its mother's slipstream, the deep blue trench beneath, let each image be a stepping stone that sinks slowly out of sight as you place your foot on the next one. The gentle rhythm continues as we pass the landmarks of an imaginary map, the Aleutians standing like beads on a string, the Hawaiian archipelago rising like green mountains from blue, the Baja lagoons written in pale aquamarine brushstrokes along a desert coast, the Caribbean's calm bays folded under palms, the South Pacific's wide distances. The whales know some of these, others belong to different populations, but to us, all of them are part of the ocean's one big room, near upwelling coasts, smelling faintly of kelp and salt. The air feels cool. Offshore the air is cleaner, less textured. In the tropics there is a warm, soft scent of rain. You breathe in each as the whales do, in long, unhurried inhalations that ask nothing and return everything. A calm spreads through your chest and down your arms, and the muscles in your face loosen. You are ready for rest, even as the narrative continues with you floating on the surface of thought. Throughout, the whales align with the Earth's larger cycles, the tilt that gives us seasons, the spin that gives us day and night, the winds that shape currents, the deep water that takes decades to complete its loops. The whales' migrations look large to us, but are small compared to these forces, and this is part of their calm, to fit into something larger without resistance. They go because the ocean turns, because light increases and decreases, because prey gathers and disperses. In accepting this, they leave us a model of how to move with the world rather than against it. As our time together nears its own quiet harbour, you can sense how the whales' journeys, though monotone, are rich with small variations that keep them tuned. Mild eddies, gentle shifts in temperature, moments of companionship or solitude. These are notes in a long chord that never breaks. The gentle rhythm continues, softer now, like the last ripples after a boat has passed, the water smoothing behind you. Imagine the whales back at their feeding grounds, the high latitudes lit by a sun that lingers, the water brimming with tiny life made from light. The whales feed steadily, the calves now stronger, the community spread over many square miles, each individual attending to its needs, each one part of a population that shares a map without needing to meet often. The songs that will drift in the breeding season are quiet now. Eating is a wordless chant, a repetition of simple necessary actions that fill the body with the energy that will carry it forward again when it is time. You feel the same readiness to rest that the whales might feel before a dive, a letting go, a softening, ocean around it. Your breath is steady. Your pillow is cool and then warm with the shape of your face. Beyond the walls of your room, the ocean is still out there, performing its endless cycles, steady and reliable. The whales are still out there, lifting their tails, rising to breathe, descending, moving forward. The gentle rhythm continues, and you have nothing you need to do but let it carry you. Thank you for joining this calm drift through the ocean's highways and the long monotonous migrations of whales. If this softened your evening and helped you feel safe enough to sleep, a small kindness. Please like and subscribe so we can keep releasing videos this often. And if you want a quiet companion as you drift off, tap the playlist in the description and let the next gentle story take over. Rest well, feel safe,